a woman fleeing captivity, a rancher haunted by loss. The night their worlds collided would ignite a war neither expected, and a bond neither could break. If you're ready for a story of survival, defiance, and love forged in fire and snow, stay with me until the very end. And when you do, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The storm came down like divine wrath. Caleb Hart stood in the doorway of his barn, one hand braced against the weathered frame, watching the world turn white. Wind howled across the Montana Valley with such fury it seemed intent on scraping the land clean, erasing fence lines, burying livestock, swallowing the last traces of civilization beneath drifts that rose higher than a man's head. The cold bit through his wool coat, through the layers beneath, straight into bone that had learned to ache with every winter that passed. He was 43 years old, felt older, looked it too, probably, with the gray threading through dark hair and the lines carved deep around eyes that had seen too much loss and not enough mercy. The ranch had been in his family for 3 generations. His grandfather had broken this land. His father had bled for it. Caleb had buried them both here, along with his wife and the son who'd lived only 3 days. Now it was just him and 1,500 acres of frozen ground that demanded everything and gave back only enough to keep a man breathing. He'd stopped asking for more than that. The cattle were secure in the western pasture, huddled in the shallow canyon that provided some shelter from the worst of the wind. The horses were in the barn behind him, restless but safe. He'd done everything a man could do to prepare. Now there was nothing left but to wait out the storm and hope the damage wouldn't be catastrophic. Caleb turned to head back inside when movement caught his eye. Something dark against the white. Too small to be livestock. Too erratic to be debris. He squinted into the driving snow, his heart kicking up despite himself. Probably a coyote or a fox, driven down from the high country by the storm. Nothing worth risking frostbite over. But the shape moved wrong, lurching, stumbling, falling forward into the snow and struggling to rise again. Christ, he muttered, already moving before his mind caught up with his feet. He grabbed the lantern from its hook just inside the barn door and pushed out into the storm. The wind hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath, driving ice crystals into his face with stinging force. He lowered his head and walked toward the shape, boots crunching through snow that was already knee-deep in places. The closer he got, the clearer it became that this was no animal. It was a person, a woman. She'd collapsed face down in the snow about 30 yards from his barn, her body curled in on itself, one arm stretched forward as if she'd been crawling toward the light. Caleb dropped to his knees beside her, setting the lantern down, and carefully turned her over. The breath left his lungs. She was small, painfully so, and dressed in nothing but a thin cotton shift that was soaked through and frozen stiff against her body. Her feet were bare, the skin blue-white and waxy. Her black hair hung in frozen ropes across a face that was more bone than flesh, cheekbones sharp as blades beneath skin so pale it looked translucent in the lantern light. But it was the marks that made Caleb's jaw tighten. Bruises ringed her wrists like manacles. More bruising darkened her throat, her arms, disappearing beneath the shift in patterns that spoke of deliberate cruelty. A cut above her left eye had bled and frozen, leaving a rust-colored trail down her temple. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. She'd been running. From what or whom, Caleb didn't know. Didn't matter right now. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse. Found it. Faint. Erratic. But there. Her skin was ice beneath his touch. "Can you hear me?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. No response. Her eyes were closed, her breathing so shallow he could barely see her chest move. She was dying. Would be dead within the hour if he left her here. Every instinct Caleb had honed over years of solitary living screamed at him to walk away. Whatever trouble this woman was running from, it would follow her here. Would bring violence and chaos to the only thing he had left. This land, this silence, this carefully maintained distance from a world that had taken everything he'd ever loved. He should leave her, should go back to his cabin, bar the door and let the storm take her. It would be kinder than what awaited if she lived long enough for whoever had done this to find her. Caleb looked down at her face, at the delicate features that seemed too refined for this brutal landscape, at the frozen tears still clinging to her lashes, and knew he couldn't do it. Damn it, he breathed. He shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around her, then scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. He could feel every bone, every ridge of her spine through the thin fabric. His stomach turned at the wrongness of it, at how close to death she already was. The walk back to the cabin felt like miles, though it couldn't have been more than 100 yards. The storm fought him every step, wind threatening to tear his burden from his arms, snow driving into his face until he could barely see. His boots slipped on ice hidden beneath fresh powder. His shoulders burned from the effort of keeping her covered, keeping her close against his chest where his body heat might do some good. By the time he kicked open the cabin door, his lungs were raw and his legs shook with exhaustion. The interior was warm, blessedly so, from the fire he'd built up before heading to the barn. Caleb carried the woman to his bed in the corner and laid her down as gently as he could manage. His coat fell away, revealing the full extent of her condition in the firelight. Worse than he'd thought, much worse. The shift was torn in places, revealing more bruises, more evidence of violence. Her fingernails were bloody and broken, as if she'd clawed at something or someone. Both ankles bore marks that matched her wrists, the skin rubbed raw and infected. She'd been chained, recently. Caleb's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He'd seen cruelty before, had witnessed what men were capable of when they forgot they were supposed to be human. But this was deliberate, systematic, the work of someone who'd taken their time. He forced himself to move, to think past the anger coiling in his gut. She needed help, needed warmth, water, medical attention that he wasn't qualified to provide but would have to attempt anyway, because the nearest doctor was in Silver Creek, 15 miles away, and the storm had made that journey impossible. First, get her warm. Caleb built up the fire until flames roared in the hearth, then filled his largest pot with snow and set it to heat. He had blankets, thick wool ones his wife had woven years ago, still soft despite the passage of time. He layered them over the woman, tucking them around her shivering form. Her eyes moved beneath closed lids, her lips parted, releasing a sound too faint to be called a word. She was still unconscious, but her body was beginning to respond to the warmth, and that was something. While the water heated, Caleb gathered what medical supplies he had. Clean cloth for bandages, a bottle of whiskey for disinfecting, salve made from pine resin, and bear fat that his mother had taught him to make. Not much. Not nearly enough. But it would have to do. The water reached a simmer. He poured it into a basin, let it cool enough that it wouldn't burn, then brought it to the bedside along with strips of clean linen. "I'm going to clean these wounds," he said quietly, though he doubted she could hear him. "It's going to hurt. I'm sorry." He started with her feet, the most immediate danger. Frostbite had set in, the skin blackened at the toes and heels. He worked carefully, warming them gradually with water that he kept replacing as it cooled, massaging gently to encourage circulation. Her body jerked at the pain, a whimper escaping her throat, but she didn't wake. Next came her hands, equally damaged but not quite as severe. Then her wrists and ankles, where he cleaned the infected wounds and applied the salve before wrapping them in bandages. The cut above her eye required several stitches, crude work with a needle and thread meant for mending leather, but it would hold. By the time he finished, 2 hours had passed and full night had fallen outside. The storm still raged, wind shrieking around the cabin's corners, snow piling against the walls. Caleb stood and stretched his back, feeling every one of his years in the stiffness of his spine. The woman lay still beneath the blankets, her breathing deeper now, more regular. Color had returned to her face, not much, but enough that she no longer looked like a corpse. Her lips had lost their blue tinge. Her fingers, when he checked them, felt warmer. She might live. Might. Caleb pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, suddenly exhausted. He should eat something, should tend to the fire, should do a dozen things that needed doing, but he couldn't seem to make himself move. Instead, he watched the woman's face in the firelight and wondered who she was, where she'd come from, what had been done to her, and by whom, and what kind of hell was going to follow when whoever had done this came looking for her. Dawn came gray and bitter. Caleb woke with a start, neck stiff from sleeping in the chair, to find pale light seeping through the cabin's single window. The storm had weakened but not broken. Snow still fell in thick curtains, and wind still moaned around the eaves. His eyes went immediately to the bed. The woman was awake. She lay absolutely still, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, her body rigid beneath the blankets. Only her eyes moved, tracking slowly from one side of the cabin to the other, taking in details with an intensity that made Caleb's chest tighten. She was assessing, looking for exits, for weapons, for threats. "You're safe," he said quietly, not moving from the chair. "Nobody's going to hurt you here." Her eyes snapped to his face, and what he saw there made his stomach drop. Terror, pure and absolute. She tried to sit up, failed, tried again with a strangled sound of pain and desperation. The blankets tangled around her legs. Her bandaged hands scrabbled at the mattress, seeking purchase, seeking escape. "Easy," Caleb said, keeping his voice low, his hands visible and empty. "Easy. You're hurt. You need to—" She made it upright through sheer force of will, swaying dangerously, her face going white with pain. Her lips moved, forming words in a language Caleb didn't recognize. Something fluid and tonal that rose and fell like music despite the fear threading through it. Chinese, he realized. She was speaking Chinese. "I don't understand," he said. "Do you speak English?" She stared at him, breathing hard, her whole body trembling with effort and terror. Then, in heavily accented but clear English, "Where?" "Montana Territory, my ranch, about 15 miles west of Silver Creek." He paused. "What's your name?" She didn't answer. Her gaze swept the cabin again, the locked door, the shuttered window, the rifle mounted above the hearth. Calculating. When her eyes returned to Caleb, they were flat and hard. "You pay?" she asked. The question hit him like a fist. "What?" "You pay. For me. How much?" Her voice shook, but she held his gaze. "What you want." Understanding crashed over Caleb with sickening clarity. She thought he'd purchased her. Thought this was another cage, another owner, another place where her body and will belonged to someone else. "No," he said, and was surprised by the vehemence in his own voice. "No, I didn't pay anyone. I found you collapsed in the snow outside my barn last night. You were dying. I brought you inside to keep you alive. That's all." She watched him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You lie." "I don't. Men lie. Always." She shifted, wincing as the movement pulled at injured muscles. "What you want?" "Nothing." Caleb stood slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "I want nothing from you. When you're well enough to travel, you're free to leave. Until then, you can stay here, warm, fed, safe. No one will touch you. That's a promise." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound that had nothing to do with humor. "Promise? Worth nothing." "Maybe." He moved toward the stove, giving her space. "But it's all I've got to offer." He busied himself making coffee, measuring grounds into the pot with hands that weren't quite steady. Behind him, he heard the rustle of blankets, the soft hiss of pain as she moved. When he glanced back, she'd pulled the covers up to her chin, her eyes tracking his every movement. "You have name?" she asked. "Caleb Hart." "Caleb Hart," she repeated, the syllables strange in her mouth. Then, after a pause, "Leanne." "Leanne," he echoed. "That's a good name." She didn't respond. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the howl of wind outside. Caleb poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to the bedside, setting it on the small table within her reach. She eyed it suspiciously but made no move to take it. "It's just coffee," he said. "Nothing in it but grounds and water." "Why you help me?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Caleb thought about his wife, buried in the small cemetery a half-mile west of the cabin. Thought about the son who'd never drawn breath. Thought about all the times he'd stood at that fence line and wondered if God had forgotten this corner of the world, or if there simply wasn't enough mercy left to reach this far. "Because leaving you would have made me something I don't want to be," he said finally. Leanne studied him with dark eyes that had seen too much. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied something, because she slowly reached for the coffee cup. Her hand shook so badly that liquid sloshed over the rim. "Let me," Caleb said, and before she could protest, he wrapped his larger hands around hers, steadying them, guiding the cup to her lips. She flinched at the contact, but didn't pull away. Took a tentative sip, then another. The warmth seemed to reach something inside her, because her shoulders sagged slightly. some of the rigidity leaving her spine. When the storm breaks, he said, I'll take you into Silver Creek. There's a sheriff there. He can help you figure out where to go, what to do next. No sheriff. The words came fast and sharp. No town, no people. Leanne, they find me. They kill me. Kill you. She set the cup down with shaking hands. Better you leave me in snow. Better I die there. Who are they? She looked away, jaw tight. Men who own me. Men who pay much money. They come. They always come. Caleb's hands clenched at his sides. You're a person. Nobody owns you. You know nothing. Her voice was flat, exhausted. You know nothing of what I am, what they make me. Then tell me. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then quietly, I come from San Francisco, work in house. You understand? He did. His stomach turned. A brothel. Yes, but not just, she struggled for words. Special house. For men with much money, much power. We are brought from China. Told we work as maids, as seamstresses. Instead, she gestured at herself, at the bruises and scars that told their own story. Instead, this. How long? 5 years. She said it without emotion, as if speaking of someone else's life. 5 years I am property of Chen Wei. He bring 12 girls. Now only 3 remain. Others die, run, disappear. And you ran. I try before. They catch me. They punish. She pulled back the blanket, revealing a long scar across her ribs. This time, different. Chen Wei, he sell me. To man in Denver, rich man, cruel man. I hear him talk. Hear what he do to last girl they bring him. She lasts 3 months before she die. Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. So you ran before they could deliver you? Yes, in Silver Creek when they stop for supplies. They tie me in wagon, but not as loose. I wait until dark, until storm come. I think storm hide me. Instead, she gestured at the cabin. Instead, here. How many men were with you? 4, maybe 5, I do not see all. And they'll come looking. It wasn't a question. Leon nodded. Chen Wei pay much money to bring me from San Francisco. Buyer pay more to receive me. They will come. They will search. And when they find me, her voice dropped to a whisper. Better you kill me now. Make it quick. Is mercy. No one's killing anyone, Caleb said, with more conviction than he felt. You're under my roof. That makes you my responsibility. And I don't give up what's mine. Leanne's eyes widened slightly. I am not yours. That's not what I meant. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with his own poor choice of words. I meant, you're safe here. As long as you want to stay, you're safe. I'll make sure of it. You are one man. I'm one man on my own land in my own home, with a rifle and enough ammunition to hold off a small army. He met her gaze steadily. I've survived worse than a handful of flesh traders. So will you. She studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Not quite trust, but perhaps the beginning of it. Why you do this? You do not know me. Don't have to know you to know what's right. Right. She tested the word like it was foreign. You believe in right? Have to believe in something. Leanne was quiet for so long that Caleb thought she'd finished talking. Then, softly, in 5 years, no man ever say this to me. No man ever look at me like I am person, like I have choice. You do have a choice, Caleb said. You can stay here until you're healed and the storm passes. Then you can decide, go to the sheriff, head to another town, try to make it back to San Francisco, whatever you think is best. Or, he hesitated, or you can stay longer, help around the ranch, learn the work. I can't pay much, but I can offer shelter and food, and a place where no one will hurt you. And if I say no, if I want to leave now, then I'll give you supplies and wish you luck. But I'd rather you didn't. Not because I want something from you, he added quickly, seeing the suspicion flash in her eyes, but because it's 20 degrees below freezing, there's 3 feet of snow on the ground, and you can barely stand without shaking. You wouldn't make it a mile. Lian looked toward the window, where pale light filtered through cracks in the shutters. How long until storm ends? Could be days, could be a week. Montana winter storms are unpredictable. Days, she repeated, then with something that might have been dark humor. So I am prisoner anyway, just different cage. It's not a cage. Door's not locked. You're free to go any time. Caleb moved toward it, lifted the bar, and pushed it open. Wind and snow immediately rushed in, bitter cold flooding the warm interior. See? Nothing's stopping you. Lian stared at the open door, at the white chaos beyond, at the opportunity she'd fought so desperately to reach. For a moment, Caleb thought she might actually try it, might gather what strength she had left and walk out into the storm on principle alone. Instead, she pulled the blankets tighter and said, "Closed door. Is cold." Something that might have been a smile tugged at Caleb's mouth. He shut the door, barred it again, and returned to the stove. Smart choice. Not choice is survival, but her voice had lost some of its sharp edges. Same thing sometimes. He made breakfast, salt pork fried in its own fat, potatoes from the root cellar, hard biscuits softened in the grease. Simple food, but hot and filling. He brought Lian a plate and was oddly pleased when she ate without hesitation, hunger overriding suspicion. They didn't speak while they ate. The silence was surprisingly comfortable, broken only by the scrape of forks against tin plates and the pop and hiss of the fire. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the world, but inside, warmth and food and temporary safety formed a fragile bubble that neither seemed willing to break. When Lian finished, she set her plate aside and looked at Caleb with eyes that were clearer than they'd been, more present. "You asked no questions. Figured you'd tell me what you wanted me to know when you were ready. Most men, they ask everything, want to know everything, want to own everything. I'm not most men." "No," she agreed quietly. "I think you are not." Another silence. Then Lian shifted, wincing as the movement pulled at her injuries. "I can work. When I'm stronger. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I learn fast. I earn my staying." "You don't have to earn anything. You can just heal." "No," the word was firm. "I do not take charity. I work for what I receive. Is the only way I keep," she searched for the word, "dignity. Is the only way I keep dignity." Caleb understood that. Understood it better than she probably realized. "All right. When you're ready, there's plenty of work. Ranch doesn't run itself." "What work you do? In winter?" "Maintain the buildings, repair equipment, take care of the livestock, cut wood, check the fences after storms, make sure nothing's frozen or broken that shouldn't be." He gestured around the cabin. "Keep this place standing for another season." "You do alone?" "For the past 3 years, yes." "Before?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Had help before. Don't anymore." Lian didn't push, which he appreciated. She seemed to understand that some stories needed time, needed trust, needed more than a single morning of fragile peace. "I help you," she said, "when I am stronger." "I'd appreciate that." Outside, the wind reached a new pitch of fury, rattling the shutters, driving snow against the walls with force enough to shake the entire structure. Lian's head came up, her body going tense, and Caleb saw fear flash across her face. "Just the storm," he said quietly. "Building's solid. Built it myself with timber from the high country. It's weathered worse than this." "Everything here is big," Lian murmured, almost to herself. "Sky big, land big, storm big. In San Francisco, everything is small, rooms small, streets small. Even sky is small between buildings. You miss it?" "No." The answer was immediate and vehement. "I miss nothing about that place. Nothing about that life." "What about before? Before you came to America?" Lian's expression shuddered. "Before does not matter. Before is dead. Only now matters. Only staying alive." Caleb nodded, understanding the need to cut away the past like infected flesh. He'd done the same after Margaret died, after the baby, after he'd realized that memory was just another kind of wound that wouldn't heal if you kept picking at it. "You should rest," he said, standing and collecting the empty plates. "Your body needs time to mend. You rest too. You look She studied him. Tired, old tired, not just body. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Been a long few years. I understand long years. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them, a recognition that transcended language and culture and circumstance. Two people who'd survived things that should have broken them. Two people who'd learned that survival was its own kind of strength, even when it felt like weakness. Rest, Caleb repeated, gentler this time. I'll wake you if anything happens. Leanne lay back against the pillows, her eyes already drooping. Caleb Hart? Yes? Thank you for not leaving me in snow. You're welcome. He watched as she drifted into sleep, her face smoothing, the lines of pain and fear temporarily erased. Then he turned to the window and looked out at the white world beyond, at the storm that showed no sign of breaking, and wondered how long they had before the men came. Because they would come. Men like the ones Leanne had described always did. They'd come for their property, their investment, their merchandise. They'd come with guns and money and the absolute certainty that they had every right to take what they believed was theirs. And when they did, Caleb would be waiting. He checked his rifle, cleaned and loaded the way it always was, checked his revolver, his ammunition stores, the spare weapons he kept hidden in various places around the cabin and barn. Not much, but enough. Maybe. Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere in the white chaos, men were searching, getting closer, bringing violence to this quiet place that had known too much of it already. Caleb looked at Leanne sleeping in his bed, at the bandages on her wrists and the scars on her skin, and felt something harden in his chest. Let them come, he thought. Let them try. This was his land, his home, and anyone who crossed that threshold with ill intent would learn what it meant to face a man with nothing left to lose. The storm broke on the third day, leaving behind a world transformed into something alien and beautiful. Snow lay in drifts that reached the cabin's eaves on the north side, sculpted by wind into shapes that caught the morning light and threw it back in shades of blue and silver. The sky stretched overhead, impossibly vast and clear, the kind of piercing winter blue that hurt to look at directly. Caleb stood in the doorway, breathing air so cold it burned his lungs, and surveyed the damage. The barn had held, though snow had piled against its eastern wall in a drift that would take hours to clear. Several fence posts in the near pasture had snapped under the weight of ice. One of the shutters on the cabin hung crooked, torn half free by the wind. Could have been worse. Had been worse, in winters past. Behind him, he heard the quiet sounds of Leanne moving around the cabin, the scrape of the kettle on the stove, the soft shuffle of her borrowed boots on the wooden floor. She'd been awake when he'd risen before dawn, already dressed in the spare clothes he'd found for her, wool trousers that had belonged to his father and had to be rolled at the cuffs, one of his own flannel shirts hanging loose on her small frame, thick socks that disappeared into boots several sizes too large. She looked like a child playing dress-up in adult clothing. But there was nothing childlike in the way she moved. Careful, economical, every gesture calculated to minimize pain from injuries that were healing but still tender. "Coffee's ready," she called from inside, her accent turning the words musical despite their plainness. Caleb stepped back into the warmth and closed the door. Leanne stood by the stove, holding 2 tin cups, steam rising from their rims. She'd tied her hair back with a strip of leather, revealing the sharp lines of her face, the healing cut above her eye that he'd stitched 3 nights ago. "Thank you," he said, accepting the cup she offered. They'd fallen into a routine over the past days, careful and courteous, circling each other like wary animals learning to share territory. Leanne asked few questions. Caleb offered few explanations. They worked in companionable silence, he repairing tack and sharpening tools, she mending his shirts with neat stitches that put his own rough work to shame. At night, he slept in the chair by the fire while she took the bed. He'd tried to insist they switch, but she'd refused with a firmness that allowed no argument. "You give me shelter," she'd said. "I do not also take your bed." Now she moved to the window and looked out at the transformed landscape, her expression unreadable. "Storm is finished. Looks that way. So now I leave. You take me to town." It wasn't a question, but Caleb heard the uncertainty underneath the flat statement. "If that's what you want." "What I want does not matter, is what must happen." "Why must it?" Lian turned to face him, her dark eyes searching his. You know why. They are coming. Maybe already here. Maybe waiting in town, asking questions, looking for Chinese girl. I bring danger to you. Better I go before they find me here. And go where? Caleb kept his voice even. Silver Creek? Where they'll be watching every road, every building, where a Chinese woman traveling alone will be noticed and remembered and reported before nightfall? Then other town. Any town. I walk if I must. In 3 feet of snow with frostbitten feet that are barely healed, you wouldn't make it 5 miles. He set down his coffee cup. Look, I understand wanting to protect me. That's decent of you, but running now would be suicide. You know it, and so do I. Better my suicide than your murder? The words hung between them, stark and honest. Caleb moved to the window and stood beside her, looking out at the white expanse that stretched to the horizon. I've been thinking about this, about what comes next. And? They'll search Silver Creek first. It's the closest town, the most logical place for you to run. When they don't find you there, they'll expand outward, check the neighboring ranches, question anyone who might have seen something. That gives us time. Time for what? To prepare. To make sure that if they do come here, we're ready. He glanced at her. You said there were 4 or 5 men? Yes. Maybe more in Silver Creek, waiting. 4 or 5 I can handle. More than that? He shrugged. We'll deal with it if it comes to that. You talk like you fight before, like you know violence. Caleb was quiet for a moment. I was at Shiloh, and Antietam. Spent 3 years learning exactly how much violence men are capable of and how to survive it. Lian absorbed this information with a small nod. War makes soldiers. Soldiers know killing. Knowing and wanting are different things. I don't want to kill anyone, but I will if I have to protect what's mine. I am not yours to protect. This land is. This home is. You're standing in it, which makes you part of it until you choose otherwise. He met her eyes. You want to leave? I won't stop you, but I'm asking you to stay, at least until spring, until the snow melts and the roads are passable and you have a real chance of making it somewhere safe. Nowhere is safe. Not for someone like me. Maybe not, but here you have a fighting chance, and you won't be alone. Lian turned back to the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Why you do this? I asked before, but you do not answer true. You say because is right, but many things are right that men do not do. Why me? Why now? Caleb considered lying, giving her something simple and noble that would satisfy without revealing too much. But she'd been honest with him about her past, about the horrors she'd endured. She deserved honesty in return. Because 3 years ago, I stood at a different window and watched my wife die of childbed fever while snow fell just like this. Watched the midwife try everything she knew and fail. Watched the light go out of Margaret's eyes while she held a baby who'd never drawn breath. His voice remained steady, but his hands gripped the window frame. I stood there and did nothing, couldn't do anything. And when they were both gone, I buried them in frozen ground and told myself I'd never feel that helpless again. He paused, gathering words that felt like stones in his throat. So when I found you dying in the snow, I had a choice. Let you go the way I let them go, or fight. Choose helplessness or choose action. I chose action, and I'll keep choosing it until you're safe or I'm dead. That's the truth of it. Lian was silent for so long that Caleb thought he'd shared too much, revealed weakness that would make her doubt his ability to protect her. Then she said, very quietly, Your wife. She have name? Margaret. Margaret Rose. Margaret Rose, Lian repeated, honoring the syllables with careful pronunciation. She was lucky woman to have husband who remember her with such pain. In my country, we say pain is how the dead know they are not forgotten. What do you say about the living? Living must forget to survive, must cut away past like, she gestured, searching for words, like farmer cut dead branches. Otherwise, dead parts poison living parts. Everything dies. That why you won't talk about before? Before San Francisco? Yes. She touched the window glass, leaving a fingerprint in the condensation. I have family once. Mother, father, 2 brothers. We are poor, but we are together. Then drought come. Crops fail. Father sell me to pay family debt. I am 14. Man who buy me say I go to America, work as maid in rich house, send money home. Instead, she shrugged. Instead, I learn what it mean to be merchandise, to have price but no value, to be owned. Your family, do they know what happened to you? I do not know. I send no letters. Maybe they think I am rich. Maybe they think I am dead. Does not matter. That girl, the one who believed promises, who thought world was kind, she is dead. I am what remains. Caleb heard the finality in her voice and recognized it. He'd spoken the same way after Margaret died, describing himself as whatever was left when love and hope burned away. The girl might be dead, but you're still here, still fighting. That counts for something. Fighting is not living, is just slower dying. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only kind of living left when everything else is taken. He turned from the window. I need to check the livestock, clear some of these drifts. You should rest. No, I help. Leanne, I help, she repeated, and there was steel in her voice. You say I can work when I am ready. I am ready now. He started to argue, saw the set of her jaw, and recognized stubbornness that matched his own. All right, but you stay close. If you feel dizzy or weak, you tell me. And if you see or hear anything unusual, riders, tracks, anything, you run back to the cabin. Understand? I understand. They bundled up in layers of wool and leather, Leanne swimming in Caleb's spare coat, and stepped out into the brilliant cold. The air bit exposed skin with teeth of ice. Their breath plumed white. Snow crunched beneath their boots with sounds like breaking bones. Caleb led the way to the barn, breaking trail through drifts that reached his thighs in places. Behind him, Leanne followed in his footsteps, struggling but determined. By the time they reached the barn door, her breath came in harsh gasps and her face had gone pale, but she didn't complain. Inside, the horses nickered greeting. The 3 cows huddled in their stalls, placid and warm. Everything had survived the storm intact. Caleb showed Leanne how to measure out feed, how to check hooves for ice buildup, how to distribute hay without startling the animals. She watched intently, memorizing each step, asking questions in her careful English. Why you keep cattle in winter? They do not make milk in cold? They winter over. Come spring, they'll calve. I'll sell the calves in summer, keep the money to buy supplies for next winter. It's a cycle. Cycle, she repeated. Everything here is cycle. Storm come, storm go. Summer, winter, life, death. That's ranching. That's Montana. They worked in silence after that, falling into rhythm. Caleb mucked out stalls while Leanne distributed feed. The work was hard, physical, the kind that left no room for thinking about anything except the task at hand. Caleb found comfort in it, the same way he had for 3 years, muscles burning, lungs working, mind blessedly quiet. He glanced at Leanne and saw her face set in concentration as she forked hay into the last stall. Her movements were awkward but determined. When she finished, she leaned against the stall door, breathing hard. You all right? Yes, just, she gestured vaguely. Not used to this work. In house, I sit. Lie down, stand, but not this. You're doing fine, better than fine, considering you could barely walk 3 days ago. Body heals fast when it must. She pushed away from the door. What next? Next we check the chicken coop, make sure the water hasn't frozen solid, then clear the path to the root cellar. After that, he stopped, went still. Leanne noticed immediately. What is wrong? Caleb held up one hand for silence. He'd heard something, the faint sound of horses, muffled by distance and snow, but unmistakable, coming from the east, from the direction of Silver Creek. Inside, he said quietly. Now. To her credit, Leanne didn't ask questions. She moved toward the barn door, but Caleb caught her arm. Not the cabin. Upstairs, the hayloft. Hide in the back corner behind the bales. Don't make a sound. Don't move. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe. Fear flashed in her eyes, but she nodded. How many? Don't know yet. Go. She climbed the ladder to the loft with surprising speed. Caleb waited until he heard her settle into position, then stepped out of the barn into the bright morning. 3 riders emerged from the tree line about a quarter mile to the east. They moved slowly, picking their way through the snow, their horses laboring in the deep powder. Even at this distance, Caleb could see they were armed, rifles visible in saddle scabbards, the bulk of pistols beneath their coats. They weren't ranchers, weren't neighbors, weren't anyone who belonged on his land. Caleb walked back to the cabin, his movements unhurried, and retrieved his rifle from its place above the hearth. He checked the load, 6 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Then he stepped back outside and positioned himself in front of the cabin, rifle held loose but ready across his chest. The riders approached at a walk. As they got closer, Caleb cataloged details. 2 white men, 1 Chinese, all well-dressed for travel in oiled canvas coats and good leather boots. The Chinese man rode in front, older, maybe 50, with a face carved from stone and eyes like chips of black glass. They stopped about 20 feet away. The horses blew and stamped, nervous in the deep snow. "Morning," Caleb said evenly. The Chinese man inclined his head fractionally. "Good morning. You are the owner of this property?" "I am." "My name is Chen Wei. These are my associates, Mr. Garrett and Mr. Sullivan." He gestured to the men flanking him. "We are searching for something that belongs to me. Something that was stolen 3 nights ago during the storm." "That's so." Caleb kept his expression neutral. "What kind of something?" "A girl, Chinese, about 20 years old, small, black hair. She escaped from a wagon in Silver Creek and disappeared into the storm. We believe she may have sought shelter at one of the ranches in the area. Haven't seen anyone matching that description." Chen Wei's expression didn't change. "You are certain? Perhaps she came to your door asking for help?" "I'm certain. Been snowed in for 3 days, haven't seen another soul." "I see." Chen Wei looked past Caleb at the cabin, his gaze taking in the single set of tracks leading from the door to the barn. "You live here alone?" "I do." "No wife? No servants?" "No one but me." One of the white men, Garrett, tall and lean with a scar across his jaw, spoke up. "Mind if we take a look inside, just to be sure?" "Yes, I mind." Caleb's voice remained calm, but he shifted his grip on the rifle slightly. "This is my home, my land. You're not welcome in either without an invitation, and you're not getting one." "Now that's not very neighborly," Sullivan said. He was shorter than Garrett, broader through the shoulders, with mean little eyes that kept flicking to the cabin windows. "We're just trying to find what's ours." "You mean, who's yours?" Caleb let contempt color his words. "I fought a war to end the idea that people can be property. Didn't much care for it then. Care for it even less now." Chen Wei raised a hand, silencing Sullivan. "Mr. Hart, it is Hart, yes? Your name was on the mailbox at the road. I understand your principles. They are admirable. But this girl is not a slave. She is a contract worker who owes a significant debt. She agreed to terms, accepted passage to America, received room and board for 5 years. Now she attempts to evade her obligations. Funny how those contracts always seem to benefit one party more than the other. The law is clear. She is bound to me until her debt is paid." "What law? Not American law. We don't recognize that kind of indenture anymore." "The law of agreement, of honor." Chen Wei's eyes hardened. "And if you are harboring her, you are interfering with my property rights. That makes you liable for damages, significant damages." "I'm not harboring anyone. I told you, I'm alone here." "Then you will not mind if we search?" "I do mind. And if you set foot on my porch without permission, you'll find out just how much I mind." The threat hung in the cold air. Garrett's hand drifted toward his coat, where Caleb guessed he kept a pistol. Sullivan straightened in his saddle, his eyes going hard. Chen Wei remained still, studying Caleb with an intensity that felt like being dissected. "You are a soldier. I see it in the way you stand, the way you hold your weapon." "What war?" "The one that mattered." All wars matter to the men who fight them." Chen Wei paused. "I too was a soldier once, in China many years ago. I learned that some fights cannot be won, only survived, and that wise men choose their battles carefully. This isn't a battle. It's my land and 3 strangers who need to leave. We will leave for now." Chen Wei gathered his reins. "But we will return. We will search every ranch, every cabin, every shed between here and the border. And when we find her, and we will find her, Mr. Hart, There will be consequences for anyone who helped her, legal consequences. Perhaps criminal charges for harboring fugitive property. Looking forward to explaining that to a judge. You mock, but you do not understand the reach of the men I represent. They have money, influence, power that extends far beyond this frozen territory. Chen Wei's voice dropped. The girl is worth $5,000 to the man who purchased her. Do you understand what that means? It means he will pay whatever is necessary to retrieve his property. It means men who would burn your ranch and leave you in the ashes without a second thought. Caleb met his gaze steadily. Then I guess they better bring enough men to get the job done, because I don't burn easy. For a long moment, Chen Wei simply stared at him. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. I believe you, which is unfortunate. For both of us. He turned his horse. Garrett and Sullivan followed, though Sullivan looked back once with an expression that promised violence. Caleb stood motionless until they disappeared back into the tree line. Even then, he waited, counting to 100, making sure they were truly gone and not circling back. When he finally moved, his hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline that had flooded his system and now had nowhere to go. He walked to the barn, his boots crunching in the snow. Leanne, they're gone. You can come down. Silence. Then the sound of hay shifting, and Leanne's pale face appeared at the edge of the loft. They come back? Count on it. She climbed down the ladder, her movements stiff. When she reached the ground, she turned to face him. You lie for me. To Chen Wei. Why? Because I wasn't lying. You're not property. You're a person, and I don't give up people to men like that. You do not understand what you risk. Chen Wei, he is not just flesh trader. He is... She searched for words. He is connected. To tongs in San Francisco, to politicians, to men with much power. He say he will destroy you. He mean it. Let him try. Caleb, no. He cut her off, his voice firm. Listen to me. I've lived alone in this cabin for 3 years. I've survived blizzards and droughts and cattle disease and crushing loneliness. I've buried everyone I ever loved in frozen ground and wondered why I keep waking up each morning. And you know what the answer is? It's because I'm still here, because I refuse to give up the only thing I have left. This land, this home, this stubborn refusal to let the world take one more goddamn thing from me. He stepped closer, his eyes burning. So if Chen Wei wants to bring his power and his money and his hired guns to my door, let him. Let him try to take you. Let him try to burn me out. Because I will fight him every step of the way. Not because I'm noble or heroic or any of that bullshit, but because I'm tired of losing. I'm tired of standing by while bad things happen to people who don't deserve them. I'm tired of being helpless. Leanne stared at him, something shifting in her expression. This is not about me. Not really. Maybe not entirely, but it's about you enough. He softened his voice. You asked me once what I wanted. This is it. I want one thing in my life to go right. One person to walk away from this broken and bleeding world with something better than what they came with. If that's you, then that's enough. And if I bring death to your door, then at least I'll die for something worth dying for. The words hung between them, stark and true. Leanne looked away, her jaw working. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I do not want you to die. Then help me make sure that doesn't happen. Help me prepare. Because they're coming back, and when they do, we need to be ready. She nodded slowly. What we do? First, we reinforce the cabin, bar the shutters, stack supplies, create positions we can defend from. Then we prepare the barn the same way, make it a secondary fallback if we need it. We stockpile ammunition, water, food, and we wait. Wait for what? For them to make their move, for them to show their hand. Caleb looked toward the tree line where the riders had disappeared. Chen Wei will search the other ranches first. Buy himself time to gather more men, make a plan. That gives us maybe a week, maybe less. We use every hour. And then? Then we find out if I'm as stubborn as I think I am. Despite everything, Leanne's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. I think you are a very stubborn man, Caleb Hart. Good. Because you're a stubborn woman, Leanne. And stubborn people survive. They walked back to the cabin together, their shadows long in the bright snow. Behind them, the barn stood silent. Above, the sky stretched vast and empty, the blue of deep winter that promised more cold, more snow, more hardship before the world softened again. But for now, there was work to do, preparations to make, a small fortress to build from a simple cabin and whatever courage they could muster. And in the quiet moments between tasks, as Caleb showed Leon how to load his spare rifle, and Leon showed Caleb how to boil water for cleaning wounds, something shifted between them. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. The understanding that whatever came next, they would face it together. When night fell, Caleb built up the fire while Lion prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread. They ate in silence, listening to the wind pick up outside, carrying new snow on its breath. "Storm coming," Caleb said, looking toward the window. "Another one?" "Never just one in Montana. They come in waves all winter." Leon set down her plate. "Is good. Storm keep them away longer." "Maybe. Or maybe it just delays the inevitable." "You believe we can win this? When they come?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I believe we can make them pay for every inch, make them bleed for every step, make them wonder if you're worth the cost. But if we fail? Then we fail fighting. That's more than most people get to choose." Leon nodded, accepting this. She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the darkness. "In China, my mother tell me story about woman warrior who fight whole army to protect her village. Everyone tell her to run, to save herself, but she say, 'This is my home, I do not run.' She die, but village remember her. Children sing songs about her courage. What's the moral? That courage is not about winning, is about choosing to stand when everyone else falls." She turned to look at him. "You give me that choice, Caleb, first man who ever does. Whatever happens, I choose to stand." Something tight in Caleb's chest loosened. "Then we stand together." "Together," Leon agreed. Outside, the wind howled and snow began to fall again, covering the tracks the riders had left, erasing evidence of the confrontation. But in the cabin, a fire burned and two people made their preparations, gathering strength for the battle they both knew was coming. And when it came, they would be ready. The next week passed in a blur of preparation and waiting. Caleb worked with methodical intensity, transforming the cabin from a simple dwelling into something that could withstand a siege. He reinforced the shutters with planks torn from the back wall of the barn, creating gun ports that could be opened and closed from inside. He stacked grain sacks against the lower portion of the walls for additional protection against bullets. He moved ammunition from the barn to the cabin, along with spare weapons, 2 rifles, 3 pistols, and a shotgun that had belonged to his father. Leon worked beside him without complaint, learning quickly and asking questions that showed she understood the gravity of their situation. She helped him stockpile water in every container they had, filled the root cellar with enough food to last a month, and practiced loading and firing the Winchester until her hands no longer shook when she held it. "Aim for center mass," Caleb told her on the 5th day, standing behind her as she sighted down the barrel at a target he'd set up against a snowbank. "Don't try for headshots, too easy to miss. You want to stop a man? You put rounds in his chest." She fired. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and the bullet punched through the grain sack they'd stuffed with straw, exactly where he'd told her to aim. "Good," he said. "Again." She fired 4 more times, each shot striking true. When the magazine was empty, she lowered the rifle and turned to face him. "I do not want to kill anyone. Neither do I. But we will if we must." "Yes." Leon was quiet for a moment, her breath forming white clouds in the cold air. "In house, I see much violence. Men hurt each other for money, for pride, for no reason at all. I tell myself I am different, that I am victim, not killer. But now," she looked down at the rifle in her hands, "now I think maybe we are all killers when pushed far enough. There's a difference between murder and self-defense. Is there? When man is dead, does it matter what word we use?" Caleb didn't have an answer for that. He'd asked himself the same question at Shiloh, standing over bodies of boys not much older than children, boys who'd died because he'd been faster or luckier or more willing to pull the trigger. The chaplain had talked about righteous cause and necessary violence, but the dead didn't care about righteousness. They were just dead. "Maybe not," he said finally. "But it matters to the living. It matters to who we are after the shooting stops." "And who are we?" People trying to survive. That's all. That's enough. They walked back to the cabin in silence, the rifles heavy in their hands. The sky had turned gray again, promising more snow. The temperature had dropped throughout the day, and now the cold had teeth that bit through layers of wool and leather. Inside, Caleb built up the fire while Lion prepared their evening meal. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm over the past days, each anticipating the other's needs, moving around the small space with practiced efficiency. It reminded Caleb of the early days with Margaret, before loss had carved trenches between them, when marriage had still felt like partnership rather than obligation. He pushed the thought away. Leon wasn't Margaret. This wasn't marriage. It was temporary alliance born of necessity, nothing more. But when she handed him a bowl of stew and their fingers brushed, he felt something flicker in his chest, something he'd thought dead and buried with his wife. "You are quiet tonight," Leon observed, settling into the chair across from him. "Thinking. About what Chenwei will do? Among other things?" Caleb took a bite of stew, letting the warmth spread through him. "It's been 6 days since they came. That's longer than I expected. Either they're having trouble gathering men, or they're planning something more than a simple raid. Chenwei is a patient man, careful. He will not come until he is sure of victory. Then we make sure victory costs him more than he's willing to pay." Leon tilted her head, studying him. "You have changed since I come here. First day you are quiet man, alone man. Now," she gestured vaguely, "now you have purpose, like sleeping thing that wake up." "Maybe I was sleeping, didn't realize it until I had something worth waking up for." "I am not worth this, worth dying for." "That's not your decision to make." Caleb set down his bowl. "Look, I know you think you're doing me a favor by doubting yourself, by trying to convince me you're not worth protecting. But I've lived 3 years believing I had nothing left worth fighting for, and it nearly killed me. Not the quick death of a bullet or a blade, but the slow death of just not caring whether I woke up tomorrow. You gave me a reason to care again, so yes, you're worth it, more than you know." Leon looked away, but not before he saw moisture gathering in her eyes. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you're brave enough to run when most people would have given up. I know you're strong enough to learn to fight when you could have stayed helpless. I know you've survived things that would have broken weaker people." He paused. "That's all I need to know. You are a good man, Caleb Hart. Too good for this world." "Good's got nothing to do with it. I'm just stubborn." She laughed at that, a small, surprised sound that transformed her face. For just a moment, Caleb saw past the scars and the wariness to the woman she might have been before the world had taken its toll. Young, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with physical features and everything to do with the light that survived despite the darkness. Then the moment passed, and she was Leon again, guarded, careful, shaped by violence into something harder than she should have needed to be. "Tomorrow we finish the barn," Caleb said, returning to practical matters. "Make sure we have a fallback position if the cabin becomes untenable. After that, we wait. Wait and watch." "Wait and watch," he agreed. That night, Caleb took first watch. He sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, looking out at the moonlit snow. The landscape was beautiful in its desolation, white and pristine and empty of any sign of human life. But he knew better than to trust the appearance of peace. Chenwei was out there somewhere, gathering his forces, making his plans. The silence wasn't safety, it was just the pause before the storm. Around midnight, Leanne woke and moved quietly to join him. She'd wrapped herself in one of the wool blankets, and she settled on the floor beside his chair without speaking. "You should sleep," Caleb said. "Cannot sleep. Too many thoughts." "What kind of thoughts?" "Wondering if I make right choice. If I should leave before they come. Save you from what is coming. We've been over this." "I know, but knowing in head and believing in heart are different." She pulled the blanket tighter. "Tell me about your wife. About Margaret." Caleb was quiet for so long that Leanne probably thought he wouldn't answer. Then slowly he began to speak. "Met her at a church social in Silver Creek. I'd just come back from the war, was working for my father on this ranch. She was the school teacher's daughter, visiting from Colorado. Smart as a whip, funny, kind. She saw something in me worth saving, though I'm still not sure what." "You loved her." "More than I knew how to say. We married that spring, and for 5 years, this place was heaven. She made it a home. Made me a better man just by being here." His voice roughened. "Then she got pregnant, and we thought we were blessed. Thought we were building something that would last. But the baby came early, in the middle of winter. Midwife did everything she could, but the baby was too small, too weak. He lived 3 days, just long enough for us to name him Thomas and fall in love. Then he died in Margaret's arms, and something in her died with him. The fever," Leanne prompted gently, "started 2 days later. By the time we knew how bad it was, the roads were impassable. No way to get a doctor from town. I tried everything. Cold compresses, willow bark tea, prayers I'd forgotten I knew. Nothing worked. She burned up from the inside, and I could only watch." He drew a shaky breath. "She died on a Tuesday morning, just as the sun was rising. Last thing she said was, 'Don't be alone too long.' And then she was gone." Leanne reached up and placed her hand over his. Her fingers were small and warm against his calloused palm. "She was right. You should not be alone. Didn't have much choice. You have choice now. You choose to help me, to not be alone. Maybe she see this. Maybe she is glad. You believe in that? In spirits watching over us?" "I believe the people we love never truly leave. They live in the choices we make, the kindness we show. Your Margaret, she live in you, in the man who saves stranger from snow, in the man who fight for what is right even when is dangerous." Leanne squeezed his hand. "She would be proud, I think." Something in Caleb's throat tightened. He'd spent 3 years believing Margaret would be ashamed of what he'd become, the hollow man who went through motions of living without actually being alive. But maybe Leanne was right. Maybe saving one person from the darkness was enough. Maybe it was what Margaret would have wanted. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For reminding me that there's more to life than just surviving." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the night fade toward dawn. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of more snow. But inside, the fire burned warm and 2 people kept watch, neither quite as alone as they'd been before. The riders came on Christmas Eve. Caleb spotted them at mid-morning, 6 dark shapes moving across the white landscape from the east. They rode in a loose formation, taking their time, confident in their numbers. Even from a distance, he could see the glint of metal, rifles, pistols, perhaps other weapons he couldn't identify. "Leanne," he called, keeping his voice level. "They're here." She appeared from the barn, where she'd been checking on the horses. Her face went pale when she saw the riders, but her hands remained steady. "How many?" "6 that I can see. Could be more following." "Chen Wei is there, in front." Caleb looked closer and confirmed her assessment. The lead rider matched the description, older Chinese man, sitting straight in the saddle despite the cold. The others were a mix, 3 white men, 1 Chinese, 1 who looked Mexican or perhaps native, all armed, all dangerous. "Inside," Caleb said. "Now. We do this from the cabin, like we planned." They moved quickly but without panic, gathering their weapons and taking positions at the windows Caleb had fortified. He gave Leanne the Winchester and took the larger caliber hunting rifle for himself. Between them, they had perhaps 40 rounds of ammunition and the element of defensive position. It would have to be enough. The riders stopped about 50 yards from the cabin, well out of easy pistol range, but close enough that Caleb could see their faces clearly. Chen Wei dismounted and walked forward another 10 yards, his hands visible and empty. "Mr. Hart," he called out, "I believe we have matters to discuss." Caleb cracked open the shutter of the gun port he'd created. "Nothing to discuss? You're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll remove you by force." Such hostility, and on Christmas Eve no less. Chen Wei's voice carried clearly in the cold air. "I come to make you an offer. A generous one." "Not interested." "You have not heard the terms." "Don't need to. The answer's no." Chen Wei was silent for a moment, then, "I am willing to pay you $500 to return the girl. That is more money than most ranchers see in 2 years. You take the money, we take the girl, everyone walks away happy. She's not for sale, and she's not a girl. She's a person who made her choice. She stays. Her choice is not relevant. She has contractual obligations. Your contract can rot. This is America, not China. We don't trade in people here." One of the white men, the tall one with the scarred jaw that Caleb recognized from the first visit, spoke up. We don't have to pay you nothing, old man. We can just take what we came for and burn this shithole to the ground. Garrett, Chenwei said sharply. Patience. But the damage was done. The threat hung in the air, stark and clear. Caleb felt Lian shift position beside him, heard the quiet click as she chambered around. Here's my offer, Caleb called back. You and your men turn around and ride out. Do that, and nobody dies today. Force the issue, and I promise you'll be burying at least half your men in frozen ground. Your choice. You are one man, Chenwei said. One man with good cover, superior position, and nothing to lose. I've made worse stands against better odds. This is foolishness. You risk your life for a whore you barely know. The word hung in the air like a slap. Beside him, Caleb felt Lian flinch. He raised his voice, making sure every man out there could hear him clearly. Her name is Lian. She's a human being with her own will and her own rights. And she's under my protection. That's all you need to know. Your protection means nothing against what is coming. Chenwei gestured, and the 5 men behind him began to spread out, circling toward different angles of approach. Last chance, Mr. Hart. Give her up. Take the money. Live to see another day. Last chance for you too. Ride out while you still can. Chenwei stared at the cabin for a long moment. Then he shook his head and walked back to his horse. Very well. You have made your choice. Now live with the consequences. He mounted smoothly and rode back to join his men. They gathered in a loose cluster, conferring quietly. Caleb watched them through the gun port, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. They are planning attack, Lian said quietly. Making strategy. Let them plan. We're ready. Caleb, I know. 6 against 2, bad odds, but we have cover, and they have to cross open ground. That counts for something. If you die because of me, then I die for something that matters. We've been over this. Lian was quiet for a moment. Then, when shooting start, I do not hesitate. I aim center mass like you teach me. I pull trigger. Good. But after, if we survive, I want you to know something. What's that? You are first man who ever treat me like I have value. Not because of my body, not because of what I can give, but just because I am person. I will remember this always, no matter what happens. Caleb glanced at her, saw the fierce determination in her eyes, and felt something warm bloom in his chest despite the cold terror of the impending fight. We're going to survive this, both of us. That's not hope talking. That's a promise. I believe you. Outside, the men had finished their conference. They split into 2 groups, Chenwei and 2 others moving to the left, the remaining 3 angling right. Classic pincer movement, trying to force Caleb to divide his attention and his fire. They're coming, he said. Remember what I taught you. Breathe steady, aim careful, squeeze, don't jerk. And if it gets bad, if they breach the cabin, you run for the barn. There's a loaded shotgun hidden in the tack room. You take it, and you run for the tree line, and you don't look back, understand? I do not run. Lian, I do not run, she repeated, steel in her voice. Not anymore. Not ever again. We stand together or we fall together. There was no time to argue. The riders had begun their approach, walking their horses forward at a slow pace. Caleb sighted on the closest man, one of Garrett's companions, a heavy-set fellow with a beard and dead eyes. Fire on my shot, he told Lian. Pick your target and make it count. The distance closed. 40 yards. 35. 30. Caleb exhaled slowly, centered his aim, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against his shoulder. The heavy round caught the bearded man high in the chest and punched him backward out of his saddle. He hit the snow and didn't move. Chaos erupted. The other men scattered, some diving from their horses, others spurring forward in a desperate charge. Lian fired twice in quick succession, and Caleb saw one of Chenwei's men stumble and go down, clutching his leg. Return fire cracked from multiple positions, bullets thudding into the cabin's walls, punching through shutters, whining through the air with sounds like angry wasps. Caleb worked the bolt, chambered another round, and fired at a shape moving toward the barn. Hit or miss, he couldn't tell. Too much smoke, too much motion. Beside him, Lian fired again, her face set in concentration, her hands steady despite the violence erupting around them. One of the attackers made it to the cabin wall and began prying at the shutters. Caleb shifted position, aimed down, and threw the gun port, and put a round through the wood. A scream answered, and the prying stopped. "Barn!" Leon gasped. "Someone in barn!" Caleb looked and swore. Sullivan had made it to the barn door and was working to force it open. If he got inside, he'd have access to their supplies, their horses, a secondary position to fire from. "Cover me," Caleb said, and before Leon could protest, he was up and moving. He threw open the cabin door and ran for the barn, snow dragging at his boots, cold air burning his lungs. Sullivan heard him coming and turned, raising his pistol. Caleb dropped and slid, the revolver barking above his head. He brought up his own rifle and fired from a prone position. Sullivan jerked backward, his pistol falling from nerveless fingers. He sat down hard in the snow, his hand going to the spreading red stain on his shirt. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Caleb scrambled to his feet and ran for the barn. Behind him, he heard Leon's rifle crack twice more. More return fire, the sound of breaking glass. He made it to the barn door, grabbed Sullivan under the arms, and dragged him inside out of the line of fire. "Shouldn't have come," Caleb muttered, already moving back toward the door. Sullivan coughed wetly. "You're dead, man." "Walking." "Maybe, but I'll have company." He left Sullivan there and ran back to the cabin. A bullet kicked up snow inches from his boot. Another tugged at his coat. Then he was through the door, slamming it shut behind him, breathing hard. Leon turned from her position at the window, her face streaked with powder smoke. "You are crazy, man." "Sullivan's down. That leaves 4. "Chenway retreat, behind rise. I cannot see him." Caleb moved to the window and confirmed her assessment. The 3 remaining men, Chenway, Garrett, and the Mexican, had pulled back to a slight rise about 70 yards out. They were using their horses for cover, occasionally firing toward the cabin, but without much effect. "They're regrouping," he said, figuring out their next move. "We hurt them. Maybe they leave." Maybe. But Caleb doubted it. Men like Chenway didn't give up easily, especially not when they'd already lost 2 men and gained nothing. This was about more than money now. It was about pride, about not showing weakness. The standoff lasted nearly an hour. Occasional shots from both sides, but nothing sustained. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the snow in shades of orange and gold. Caleb's arms ached from holding the rifle ready. Beside him, Leon shivered despite the warmth from the fire, adrenaline crash setting in. "Why they wait?" she asked. "Hoping we'll make a mistake, get careless, or maybe they're waiting for dark." "Dark is bad for us. Bad for everyone." Caleb shifted his grip on the rifle. "But if they try to rush us in darkness, they'll be firing blind. Evens the odds a bit." As if his words had been a signal, gunfire suddenly erupted from the rise. Not the sporadic shots from before, but sustained fire from multiple weapons. Bullets hammered the cabin, punching through shutters, shattering what remained of the window glass, chewing into the wood with sounds like 1,000 angry teeth. "Down!" Caleb shouted, dragging Leon below the window line. The firing continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When it finally stopped, the silence rang in Caleb's ears. Smoke drifted through the cabin from a dozen small fires where hot lead had ignited dry wood. He stomped them out quickly, then risked a glance through the gun port. The rise was empty. The horses were gone. The men had vanished. "Where did they go?" Leon whispered. Caleb's blood turned to ice. "They're flanking. Moving under cover of that fire, could be anywhere by now." He moved to the rear wall where a smaller window looked out toward the barn and the tree line beyond. Nothing. No movement. No sign of... The barn door exploded inward with a crash of splintering wood. Caleb spun, heart hammering. They were in the barn. Had to be. But from there they could set fire to the structure, drive out the horses, even tunnel under the snow to approach the cabin unseen. "We need to stop them," he said. "If they burn the barn, we lose our fallback position." "His trap? They want you to go outside." "I know." He checked his revolver, then looked at Leon. "But if we stay here and let them control the barn, we're finished anyway. So I'm going out. You stay here. Keep the rifle trained on that rise. Anyone shows themselves, you fire." "Caleb, no. This isn't a discussion." He moved to the door, then paused and looked back. "If I don't make it back, you wait until full dark. Then you run for the tree line, and you keep running. There's money hidden under the floorboard by the bed. Take it, get to Butte or Helena. Start over somewhere they'll never find you. I am not leaving you. You will if I'm dead. Promise me. Leon's jaw set stubbornly. I promise nothing. Despite everything, Caleb almost smiled. Stubborn woman. Stubborn man. He opened the door and stepped out into the dying light, his rifle at his shoulder, every sense screaming. The distance to the barn was perhaps 30 yards. Might as well have been 30 miles. He'd made it halfway when Garrett stepped out from behind the barn, a rifle raised and aimed. "Merry Christmas," Garrett said, and pulled the trigger. The world slowed to a crawl. Caleb saw the muzzle flash, saw the smoke bloom from Garrett's rifle, heard the crack of the shot like a distant thunderclap. He was already moving, throwing himself sideways into the snow, but he knew with cold certainty that he'd been too slow. The bullet caught him high on the left side, spinning him around. Pain exploded through his shoulder, white-hot and all-consuming. He hit the ground hard, snow cushioning the impact, his rifle flying from nerveless fingers. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Leon scream his name. Then the Winchester spoke from the cabin window, once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Garrett stumbled backward, his rifle falling, his hands clutching at his midsection. He made it 2 steps before his legs gave out and he collapsed into the snow. Caleb tried to push himself up, but his left arm wouldn't respond. Blood soaked through his coat, hot against his skin, steaming in the frigid air. His vision swam. The world tilted dangerously. "Move," he told himself. "Get up. Get to cover." He rolled onto his right side, using his good arm to drag himself toward the cabin. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through his shoulder. Behind him, he heard shouting, Chenwei's voice, harsh and commanding. More gunfire cracked out, bullets kicking up snow around him. Then Leon was there, materializing out of the chaos like an avenging spirit. She grabbed his coat with both hands and hauled with strength that should have been impossible for someone her size. Caleb's boots scraped through the snow as she dragged him backward, her face set in fierce determination. The Winchester slung across her back. "Almost there," she gasped. "Hold on. Almost—" A bullet whined past her head, so close Caleb felt the displaced air. Leon didn't flinch. She kept dragging, kept moving, her small body straining against his weight. 10 yards, 5. Then they were at the cabin door, and she was shoving him through, slamming it shut behind them, throwing the bar into place. Caleb collapsed against the wall, breathing in ragged gasps. Blood pulsed from the wound in his shoulder, spreading across his coat in a dark stain. Leon dropped to her knees beside him, her hands already working to peel back the fabric. "How bad?" he managed. "I do not know yet. Hold still." She tore his shirt open, her fingers surprisingly gentle as they probed the wound. "Bullet go through. This is good. No digging it out. Feels fantastic. Do not joke. You are hurt bad." She pressed her palm against the exit wound on his back, applying pressure. "I need to stop bleeding. Need cloth, hot water, needle, and thread." "Whiskey," Caleb said, "for disinfectant." "And for pain." "Yes." She looked toward the stove, toward the supplies they'd stockpiled, then back at him. Her face was pale but composed. "You must stay awake. Keep pressure on wound while I prepare." "Not going anywhere." She gave him what might have been a smile, then moved with quick efficiency to gather what she needed. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Caleb could hear voices, Chenwei and the Mexican, arguing in a mixture of English and Spanish. They were regrouping, trying to decide their next move. "How many left?" he asked when Leon returned with her arms full of supplies. "2 that I see. Chenwei and the other one. Maybe more hiding." She knelt beside him again and began cleaning the wound with water that steamed in the cold cabin air. "Garrett is dead. I see him fall. Sullivan, I think also dead or dying. The others from before, the one you shoot first and the one I hit in leg, they run away or bleed out. So we got 4 of 6. Yes, but you are shot. This changes everything." Caleb gritted his teeth as she poured whiskey directly into the wound. The pain was astonishing, like being shot all over again. "Doesn't change anything. We still fight, still hold them off. You cannot even lift rifle. Then you shoot. I'll talk you through it. Leanne threaded the needle with shaking hands and began stitching the wound closed. Her work was careful but inexperienced, and each pull of the thread sent fresh agony lancing through Caleb's shoulder. He bit down on a leather strap she'd given him and focused on breathing, on staying conscious, on not screaming. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am sorry I hurt you." "Not your fault. Did what had to be done. If I had not come here, you would not be shot. You would be safe. Would be alone. This is better." She finished the stitching and bandaged the wound with strips of clean cloth, wrapping them tight around his shoulder and across his chest. When she was done, she sat back on her heels and looked at him with eyes that held too much fear and too much guilt. "You saved my life," Caleb said quietly. "Out there. Could have stayed in here. Stayed safe. You would do same for me. Doesn't make it less brave." A bullet suddenly punched through the shutter above their heads, showering them with splinters. Both of them dropped flat as more shots followed, systematically targeting the windows and gun ports they'd created. "They are testing defenses," Leanne said, crawling toward the nearest window. "Looking for weak points. Let them look. We reinforced everything." But even as he spoke, Caleb smelled something that made his blood run cold. Smoke. Not gunpowder smoke, but the acrid stench of burning wood. "The barn," Leanne said, her face going white. "They set fire to barn." Caleb forced himself upright, ignoring the protest from his wounded shoulder. Through the gun port, he could see orange flames licking up the barn's eastern wall, spreading fast in the dry timber. Black smoke billowed into the darkening sky. "Horses," he said. "Have to get the horses out." "You cannot go outside again. You will die." "Can't let them burn." He struggled toward the door, but his legs wouldn't hold him. He sagged against the wall, cursing his weakness. Leanne caught him before he fell. "I go. You stay here. Keep watch." "Leanne, no. Is only way. You cannot move. I can." She grabbed the Winchester and checked the load. "How many bullets I have?" "4 in the rifle. More in the box by the bed." She loaded her pockets with ammunition, her movements quick and sure. Then she looked at Caleb, and something passed between them, an understanding that this might be goodbye, that the next few minutes could end with one or both of them dead. "If something happens," she said quietly, "if I do not come back, you'll come back. But if I do not, I want you to know you give me something I never have before. You give me choice. You give me dignity. You treat me like person who matters. I will carry this with me wherever I go." She touched his face, her fingers light against his cheek. "Thank you, Caleb Hart, for everything." Then she was moving toward the door, and Caleb couldn't stop her, couldn't do anything but watch as she lifted the bar and slipped outside into the smoke and chaos. The next minutes felt like hours. Caleb positioned himself at the window, his revolver in his good hand, and watched through the gathering dusk as Leanne ran for the burning barn. Smoke obscured much of the view, but he saw her reach the door, saw her disappear inside. Movement caught his eye. Chenwei emerging from behind a snowbank, raising his rifle. Caleb fired twice with his revolver, the shots going wild because of the distance and his shaking hand, but close enough to make Chenwei duck back into cover. The barn door flew open and the 3 horses burst out, eyes rolling with terror, hooves churning through the snow. Leanne came behind them, bent low, the Winchester in her hands. She fired toward Chenwei's position, working the lever action with competence that Caleb had taught her. Then she was running for the cabin, and Chenwei was moving to cut her off, and Caleb saw with horrible clarity that she wasn't going to make it. He forced himself to his feet, using the wall for support, and staggered to the door. His left arm hung useless at his side. Blood soaked through the bandages. His vision tunneled, but he could see Leanne stumbling through the snow, could see Chenwei taking careful aim. Caleb threw open the door and fired his revolver, 3 shots in rapid succession. The first 2 missed, but the third caught Chenwei in the shoulder, spinning him around. His shot went wide, kicking up snow a foot from Leanne's head. She made it to the cabin and through the door, and Caleb slammed it shut behind her. They both collapsed against the wall, breathing hard, alive against all odds. "Horses?" Caleb gasped. "Free. Running for trees. They will survive." "Good. That's good." Outside, the barn was fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the darkening sky. The heat was intense even from a distance, turning the snow around it to slush. Caleb watched his father's handiwork burn and felt something twist in his chest. 3 generations of hearts had built this place, and now it was being reduced to ash and embers. But Lien was alive. That mattered more. "Chenwei is hit," she said, moving to the window. "I see him behind rock. The other one, the Mexican. He help him. They are maybe 50 yards away. Can you get a shot?" "Not clean one. Too much smoke. Too much cover." Caleb tried to stand, failed, and settled for pulling himself along the wall to the other window. His shoulders screamed protest, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. "We need to finish this. Can't keep defending forever. You need doctor, need real medicine. If we wait too long, there is no doctor, no help coming, just us." He looked at her, saw the fear and determination warring in her expression. "We end it tonight, one way or another." "How? You can barely stand." "Don't need to stand, need to think." He forced his mind past the pain, past the exhaustion, to the tactical lessons learned in a different war. "Fire's working in our favor now, creating smoke, obscuring their vision same as ours, and it's getting dark. Full night in maybe 20 minutes. Darkness helps them. Helps whoever moves first, whoever's willing to take the risk." He met her eyes. "I'm going to draw their fire. When they shoot at me, you take the shot." "No, you are already wounded. You cannot." "It's the only way. They know I'm hurt. They'll focus on me, expect me to be the weak point. Won't expect you to be the real threat. This is suicide." "It's tactics. There's a difference." He checked his revolver. 2 rounds left. Not much, but enough. "I'll create an opening. You make it count." "Caleb, I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you the plan. When I give the signal, you take the shot. Can you do that?" Lien stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Yes, I can do that." "Good." He handed her his rifle, the one with the longer range and better accuracy. "You remember everything I taught you?" "Yes. Breathe steady. Aim center mass. Squeeze, not jerk. And don't hesitate. Hesitation gets people killed." "I will not hesitate." They moved into position. Lien at the front window, Caleb at the side where he could see Chenwei's position behind the rock. The barn fire was beginning to die down now, having consumed most of the available fuel, but smoke still hung thick in the air. "On 3, Caleb said. 1, 2. He threw open the shutter and fired his revolver at Chenwei's position. The shot went wide, deliberately so, but it had the desired effect. Both Chenwei and the Mexican rose from cover, returning fire toward Caleb's window. Lien's rifle cracked once. The Mexican jerked backward, his rifle flying from his hands. He fell into the snow and didn't move. Chenwei spun, searching for the source of the shot, and in that moment of distraction, Caleb fired his last round. It caught Chenwei in the chest, punching through his coat. He staggered, dropped to one knee, his hand going to the wound. But he didn't fall. Somehow, impossibly, he stayed upright, his face twisted with pain and rage, and he raised his own pistol with a shaking hand, aiming toward the cabin. Lien fired again. This time, Chenwei went down and stayed down. Silence fell across the ranch, broken only by the crackle of dying flames and the whisper of wind through the snow. Caleb waited, counting seconds, watching for any sign of movement. None came. "Is it over?" Lien whispered. Yes, I think it's over." She lowered the rifle with shaking hands and turned to look at him. Her face was streaked with powder smoke and tears, her eyes wide with shock at what they'd just survived. "We did it. We actually did it. You did it. That shot. That second shot. Perfect. You taught me well. You learned fast." Caleb felt his strength failing, his legs starting to give out. "Should probably check the bodies. Make sure. You should sit down before you fall down." Lien caught him as he swayed, guiding him to the chair by the fire. "I will check. You rest. Be careful. I will be careful." She slipped outside, the Winchester held ready, and disappeared into the smoke. Caleb sat in the chair and tried to stay conscious, tried to focus on anything except the pain radiating from his shoulder and the exhaustion dragging at his limbs. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had gone strange, elastic, and unreliable. Then Lian was back, closing the door behind her. All dead: Chen Wei, the Mexican, Garrett, Sullivan. The others from before also. 6 men came, 6 men die. Good. That's good. It is not good. It is terrible. But it is necessary. She moved to his side and began checking his bandages. Fresh blood had soaked through, but not as much as Caleb had feared. Wound is still bleeding. You need real doctor. Morning. We'll go in the morning. You may not have until morning? Then I'll die comfortable. In my own chair, having won. He managed a weak smile. Could be worse. Do not joke about dying. Her voice broke. Please, I cannot lose you too. The raw emotion in her words cut through his pain-fogged mind. He reached up with his good hand and touched her face, feeling the wetness of tears on her cheeks. Hey, I'm not going anywhere. Too stubborn, remember? You are bleeding. You are pale. I need you to stop worrying. I've survived worse than this. He pulled her down so she was sitting on the floor beside his chair, her head resting against his knee. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't burn down what's left of this place. She laughed at that, a watery, broken sound, and pressed her face against his leg. Stupid man. Brave. Stupid man. Brave, stupid woman. They sat like that as darkness fell outside and the barn fire died to embers. The cabin was warm, the silence punctuated only by the pop of logs in the hearth and the occasional gust of wind against the walls. It felt like the calm after a storm, peaceful but precarious, the kind of quiet that could shatter at any moment. But for now, they had survived, had fought impossible odds and won, had defended their small piece of earth against men who'd thought them weak and found them anything but. Caleb? Lian said softly. Yeah? What happens now? After tonight? He thought about the question, about the bodies in the snow and the burned barn and the blood on his hands. Thought about the investigation that would come, the questions that would be asked, the scrutiny they'd face. We tell the truth, he said finally. We tell the sheriff exactly what happened. Self-defense? Clear as day. 6 armed men attacked my property, tried to abduct you by force. We defended ourselves. That's the law. And if they do not believe us, if they say Chinese woman is not worth defending, then we'll make them believe. I'll testify. Other ranchers around here, they know me, know I'm not the kind to shoot men without cause. They'll back our story. You have much faith in law. I have faith in the truth, and the truth is you're free. Chen Wei's dead. His organization will crumble without him. The man in Denver who wanted to buy you, he'll find someone else, forget you ever existed. You can start over, build a life. Here? The question was tentative, almost hopeful. Or somewhere else? Caleb was quiet for a moment, feeling the weight of what she was asking. That's your choice. Always been your choice. You want to go to San Francisco, try to find your family, I'll stake you the money. Want to go east, start fresh somewhere nobody knows your past, I'll help with that too. Or... He paused. Or you can stay here. Help me rebuild the barn, learn ranching, make this place a home again. You would want me to stay, even after all the trouble I bring? Trouble's over. All that's left is 2 people and a ranch that needs more hands than I've got. He looked down at her, saw the vulnerability in her eyes. But I won't lie to you. Life here is hard. Winters are brutal. The work never stops. And people in town, they'll talk. They'll judge. Some won't accept a Chinese woman living on a ranch with a white man, married or not. Married? The word came out barely above a whisper. Caleb felt heat rise in his face. I'm saying, if you stayed, if you wanted, there'd be options, ways to make it proper. Or not. Your choice, like everything else. Lian was very quiet. Then, you would marry me? Even knowing what I was, what I did? What was done to you? There's a difference. He touched her hair gently. And yes, if that's what you wanted. If you wanted a partner instead of an owner. Someone to build something with instead of someone to serve. I'd marry you tomorrow. You barely know me. I know enough. Know you're brave and strong and stubborn as hell. Know you don't quit even when quitting would be easier. Know you look at this broken down ranch and this broken down man and don't run screaming. He smiled faintly. That's more than enough. Leon lifted her head and looked at him, her eyes searching his face. In my country there is saying, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. You teach me this. Teach me to stand when I want to fall. Teach me I am worth fighting for. She reached up and placed her hand over his heart. I think maybe I love you, Caleb Hart. Is too soon, is too fast, but I think is true. Something in Caleb's chest expanded, pushing against his ribs. I think maybe I love you too. Even though we are both broken? Especially because we're both broken. Broken things understand each other, and sometimes, he covered her hand with his own, sometimes broken things can heal together. She smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her, unguarded and genuine and beautiful, in a way that had nothing to do with physical features and everything to do with the light behind it. Then I stay. I help rebuild barn. I learn ranching. I become partner, not property. Partner, Caleb agreed. Equal. In everything. Equal, she repeated, testing the word like it was precious. I like this. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting down to cover the evidence of battle, blanketing the bodies and the burned barn and the churned earth in a layer of fresh white. By morning, the land would look peaceful again, pristine and unmarked except for the smoke-stained walls and the knowledge of what had been defended here. But that was tomorrow's concern. Tonight, there was warmth and safety, and 2 people who'd found each other in the midst of violence and discovered something worth fighting for. Caleb felt his eyes drifting closed, exhaustion finally overwhelming his will to stay conscious. Leon's voice came from far away, urgent and worried, but he couldn't quite make out the words. He felt her hands on his face, felt her trying to keep him awake. Sorry, he mumbled. So tired. Caleb, stay with me. He wanted to reassure her, wanted to tell her he'd be fine, but the darkness was pulling him down with irresistible force. The last thing he felt was her arms around him, holding tight, refusing to let go. Then nothing. He woke to pale morning light and the smell of coffee. His shoulder throbbed with dull persistence, but the sharp agony had faded to something manageable. He was in his bed, he realized, covered with every blanket they owned. Someone had changed his bandages and cleaned the dried blood from his skin. Leanne sat in the chair beside the bed, her head tilted back against the wall, asleep. She still wore the clothes from yesterday, stained with smoke and blood and powder residue. The Winchester lay across her lap, her hand resting on it, even in sleep. Caleb watched her for a moment, feeling something fierce and protective rise in his chest. She'd kept watch all night, he realized. Had stayed awake while he'd slept, making sure he kept breathing, making sure no one else came. Leanne, he said softly. Her eyes snapped open, instantly alert. Caleb, you are awake. How do you feel? Like I got shot, but alive. He tried to sit up, managed it with her help. How long was I out? All night. I was worried. You were so pale, breathing so shallow. She touched his forehead, checking for fever. But now you have color again. This is good. You stayed up all night. Someone had to keep watch. Make sure you did not die while I sleep. You should have rested. I would have been fine. I make choice. Same as you make choice to save me from snow. Same as you make choice to fight for me. She met his eyes steadily. We are partners now. Partners protect each other. Caleb felt warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the blankets. Yes, we are. I make coffee and breakfast. You need to eat, build strength. Then we go to town, tell Sheriff what happened, face whatever comes together. Together, he agreed. She helped him into a clean shirt, working carefully around his bandaged shoulder, then brought him coffee and bacon and eggs that tasted better than anything he'd eaten in 3 years. They ate in comfortable silence, the morning light growing stronger through the windows. When they'd finished, Leon helped him to the door and they stepped outside together. The snow had covered much of the carnage, but the burned barn stood as stark testimony to what had happened. The bodies were still visible, dark shapes partially buried in fresh powder. We should bury them, Leon said quietly, before we go to town. Ground's frozen solid. Would take days to dig graves deep enough. Then what we do? Caleb considered. We wrap them in canvas, weigh them with stones. When the thaw comes, we'll give them proper burial. Even men like that deserve that much. They worked together through the morning, Caleb directing and Lian doing most of the physical labor. By noon, all 6 bodies were wrapped and weighted, arranged in a line behind what remained of the barn. It wasn't much, but it was decent. It was right. Then they hitched the surviving wagon, loaded it with supplies, and began the slow journey toward Silver Creek. The ride took most of the afternoon, Caleb's shoulder protesting every bump in the road. But Lian drove with careful competence, avoiding the worst of the ruts, keeping the horses to an easy pace. They didn't talk much, both lost in their own thoughts about what awaited them in town. As they crested the final rise and Silver Creek came into view, Caleb felt Lian stiffen beside him. What if they do not believe us? What if they take me away? They won't. I won't let them. You cannot stop whole town. Watch me. He said it with such conviction that Lian actually smiled. Stubborn man, stubborn woman. They drove into town as the sun touched the western horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and red. People stopped to stare at the Chinese woman driving the wagon, at the wounded man beside her, at the blood still visible on their clothes, despite their attempts to clean up. Caleb directed Lian to the sheriff's office. They climbed down from the wagon, Caleb moving stiffly, and walked inside together. The sheriff looked up from his desk, his eyes widening. Hart, what in the hell happened to you? Got a story to tell you, Tom, Caleb said. Best sit down. It's going to take a while. And as Lian settled into the chair beside him and Caleb began to speak, he felt her hand slip into his, small and warm and steady. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Sheriff Tom Bradley was a lean man in his 50s with a handlebar mustache and eyes that had seen enough frontier justice to know the difference between a story and the truth. He listened without interrupting while Caleb talked, his gaze occasionally shifting to Lian, who sat perfectly still with her hands folded in her lap. When Caleb finished, the silence in the office stretched long enough to make his shoulders start throbbing again. Finally, Tom leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. 6 men dead, he said quietly. That's a hell of a Christmas Eve, Hart. Wasn't my first choice for how to spend it. I imagine not. Tom looked at Lian. Miss, you understand you're going to need to tell your side of this too? In your own words? Lian lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. Yes, I understand. And you'll swear to the truth of it, under oath if necessary? I will swear. Everything Caleb say is true. Chen Wei and his men come to take me. We tell them no. They attack. We defend. Her English was careful but clear. 6 men come to kill us. 6 men die instead. Tom nodded slowly. You know there's going to be an investigation. I'll need to ride out to Hart's place, see the scene for myself. There'll be questions from the territorial marshal, maybe even federal authorities, given that some of this involves Chinese immigration matters. We expected that, Caleb said. We've got nothing to hide. What about the bodies? You left them on your property? Wrapped and weighted behind the barn, ground's too frozen to bury them proper. We'll do it right come spring thaw. Fair enough. Tom stood and moved to the window, looking out at the darkening street. Here's the thing, Hart. I've known you since you came back from the war. You're not a killer. You're not the type to gun down 6 men without cause. But there are going to be people in this town who see a white rancher and a Chinese woman and make assumptions. Some won't be kind. Let them assume what they want. Truth is truth. Truth doesn't always matter as much as it should. Tom turned back to face them. The Chinatown district in San Francisco, they've got reach, got money, got lawyers. If Chen Wei was connected like the lady says, there could be people looking to make an example. They might push for charges, claim she was stolen property, claim you're guilty of theft and murder. Then they'll have to prove it in court. And they can't because it's not true. Maybe so. But legal battles cost money, time, energy. You prepared for that? Caleb felt Lian's hand tighten in his. If that's what it takes. Tom studied them both for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. All right, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take your statements, get them written down proper, and signed. Tomorrow I'll ride out to your ranch with a deputy, examine the scene, confirm your story. Then I'll file a report with the territorial marshal stating that this was a clear case of self-defense against armed intruders. That should be enough to close the matter locally. And if it's not enough, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Tom returned to his desk and pulled out paper and pen. But Hart, I'm going to give you some advice as a friend. If this woman wants any kind of future in this territory, any kind of safety, she's going to need legal standing. Right now, she's nobody in the eyes of the law. Just another Chinese immigrant with no papers, no protection. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you make her somebody. Give her a name that means something. Make her a citizen by marriage if you're willing. Tom's eyes were shrewd but not unkind. I can see the way you two look at each other. This isn't just about protection anymore, is it? Caleb glanced at Leanne, saw the question in her eyes. No, it's not. Then make it official. Marry her. Soon as possible. That'll give her rights, give her standing, make it a hell of a lot harder for anyone to claim she's property instead of a person. Tom dipped his pen in ink. Judge Morrison can perform the ceremony. He's fair-minded, won't care about her being Chinese, and once she's Mrs. Hart, she's under the protection of your name and your land claim. That counts for something out here. We haven't really discussed, Caleb began. Yes, Leanne interrupted quietly. I say yes. Both men turned to look at her. She sat straighter in her chair, her eyes clear and certain. If Caleb will have me, I say yes. I want to be Mrs. Hart. I want the protection, yes, but more. I want the partnership. Want to build life together. This is my choice, made freely. Something warm and bright bloomed in Caleb's chest. You're sure? We don't have to rush this just because... I am sure. Are you? He thought about the past weeks, about finding her in the snow and watching her transform from terrified victim to fierce warrior. Thought about the way she'd dragged him to safety despite her own fear, the way she'd kept watch all night to make sure he kept breathing. Thought about the future stretching ahead, years of hard work and harder winters, but faced together instead of alone. Yes, he said. I'm sure. Tom allowed himself a small smile. Well then, let me get these statements written up and then we'll go see the judge. Might as well get everything settled tonight. The next hour passed in a blur of official business. Caleb and Leanne each gave their statements, signing the documents with hands that shook slightly from exhaustion and emotion. Tom asked pointed questions, clarifying details, making sure the timeline was clear. When he was satisfied, he locked the statements in his desk and gestured toward the door. Judge Morrison lives above the dry goods store. Let's go see if he's amenable to performing a wedding on Christmas Day. They walked through Silver Creek's main street as full darkness fell. Lamps were being lit in windows, families gathering for holiday meals. A few people stared as they passed, whispers following in their wake. Caleb felt Leanne shrink slightly against his side, and he wrapped his good arm around her shoulders. Hold your head up, he murmured. You've got nothing to be ashamed of. They judge me. I see it in their eyes. Let them judge. You know who you are. That's all that matters. Judge Morrison was a portly man in his 60s with kind eyes and ink-stained fingers from a lifetime of writing legal documents. He listened to Tom's explanation, asked a few questions of his own, and then smiled at Leanne with genuine warmth. My dear, I'd be honored to perform the ceremony, though I must ask, are you entering into this marriage of your own free will, without coercion or duress? Yes, Leanne said firmly. This is my choice, my will. No one forced me. And you understand that marriage is a legal contract that binds you to this man in the eyes of the law? That you'll have both rights and responsibilities as his wife? I understand. I want this. Then we'll proceed. Morrison gestured to his small sitting room. Tom, you'll serve as witness? Gladly. They gathered in Morrison's parlor, a modest space made warm by a crackling fire, and the judge's wife, who appeared with a hastily picked bouquet of dried flowers for Leanne. The woman was plump and motherly, and she fussed over Leanne's appearance, smoothing her hair and pinning the flowers to her coat. There, Mrs. Morrison said, stepping back. Now you look like a proper bride. Leanne touched the flowers with tentative fingers, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you. You are kind. Kindness costs nothing, dear, and you look like you could use some. She squeezed Leanne's hand. Welcome to Montana. Welcome to our town. The ceremony itself was brief and simple. Judge Morrison read from a worn book of legal texts, his voice steady and sure. Caleb repeated the vows, feeling the weight of each word, the promise they carried. When it came to Leanne's turn, her voice was quiet but unwavering. I, Leanne, take you, Caleb Hart, to be my husband, to stand with you, to work beside you, to build life together, in hardship and in joy, in sickness and in health, as long as we both shall live. Morrison smiled. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Hart, you may kiss your bride. Caleb turned to Leanne, suddenly uncertain. They'd shared danger and determination, but this was different. This was the beginning of something new, something neither of them had dared hope for. He cupped her face gently, mindful of his wounded shoulder, and bent to kiss her. Her lips were soft and warm, and when she kissed him back, he tasted salt from tears he hadn't realized she was crying. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet, full of promise rather than passion. When they parted, Mrs. Morrison was dabbing at her own eyes. Beautiful, just beautiful. Now you two will stay for supper, won't you? It's Christmas, and no one should be alone on Christmas. Caleb started to politely decline, but Leanne spoke first. We would be honored, thank you. They shared a simple meal with the Morrisons and Sheriff Bradley, roast chicken and potatoes, bread still warm from the oven, apple pie that made Caleb close his eyes with pleasure. The conversation was easy, carefully avoiding the violence that had brought them to this moment, focusing instead on the future. You'll need help rebuilding that barn, Morrison said, pouring coffee. I expect the men around here will be willing to lend a hand come spring. That's how we do things in Montana. Neighbors help neighbors. I'd appreciate that, Caleb said. Place has been struggling with just me to run it. Having Leanne to help will make a difference, but another set of hands for the heavy work would be welcome. What will you raise? Mrs. Morrison asked Leanne. Cattle? Horses? I do not know yet. I am still learning. Leanne glanced at Caleb. But I will learn. I am quick study. She is, Caleb confirmed. Already proved that. After dinner, Tom excused himself to make arrangements for the ride out to the ranch the next day. The Morrisons offered Caleb and Leanne their spare room for the night, concerned about Caleb's injury and the late hour. Dr. Williams should look at that shoulder in the morning, Morrison said. Make sure there's no infection setting in. I'll see him before we head back, Caleb promised. They retired to the small guest room, clean and simple with a narrow bed and a washstand. Leanne helped Caleb remove his coat and shirt, her fingers gentle as she checked his bandages. The wound had bled through slightly, but not alarmingly so. It is healing, she said. This is good. Thanks to you. If you hadn't stitched me up when you did, do not think about what could have been. We are here. We are alive. We are married. She said the last word with a mixture of wonder and disbelief. I am Mrs. Hart now. Yes, you are. It feels strange, like wearing clothes that do not quite fit yet, but good strange, like they will fit, given time. Caleb caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. We've got time. All the time we need. They lay down together on the narrow bed, Caleb on his good side with Leanne tucked against him. It was the first time they'd shared a bed as something other than patient and caretaker, and there was an awkwardness to it, a careful awareness of boundaries and new intimacies. Caleb? Leanne said into the darkness. Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for fighting for me, for giving me choice and dignity and future. She paused. I know this marriage is partly for protection, for legal standing, but I want you to know I meant the vows, all of them. So did I. Even the part about sickness and health, about staying together. Especially that part. He tightened his arm around her. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again. After Margaret died, I thought I was done. Finished with loving anyone, with letting anyone close. But you changed that. Made me want to try again. I am not her. I cannot be her. I don't want you to be her. I want you to be you. That's more than enough. Leanne was quiet for a moment. Then, in my country, we have tradition. On wedding night, couples share tea, make promises. But we have no tea here. We have coffee. She laughed softly. Is not the same. But maybe for us coffee is better. Is American. Is New Start. New Start, Caleb agreed. I like the sound of that. They drifted into sleep wrapped around each other, two broken people beginning to heal, two lonely souls finding unexpected companionship in the aftermath of violence. Morning came bright and cold. Dr. Williams examined Caleb's shoulder, tisking at the rough stitching, but admitting it had done the job. He cleaned the wound properly, applied fresh bandages, and prescribed rest that Caleb knew he wouldn't get. You're lucky, Williams said. Another inch to the right, and that bullet would have hit the artery. You'd have bled out before anyone could help you. Luck had nothing to do with it, Caleb said, looking at Leanne. Had an angel watching over me. Williams followed his gaze and smiled. Mrs. Hart, you did fine work under difficult circumstances. If you ever want to learn proper nursing, my door is open. Thank you, Leanne said. I would like that. Sheriff Bradley arrived mid-morning with a deputy, and they all rode out to the ranch together. The journey took most of the day, the horses struggling through snow that had drifted even deeper overnight. When they finally reached the property, Tom spent 2 hours examining everything. The cabin with its fortified walls and gun ports, the burned barn, the wrapped bodies, the shell casings scattered across the churned snow. Exactly as you described it, he said finally. Clear evidence of defensive action, multiple positions of attack, signs of sustained assault. He walked to where the bodies lay. 6 men armed and equipped for violence, against a wounded man and a woman who'd never fired a rifle before a week ago. Hell of a stand you made. Didn't have much choice. There's always a choice. You chose to fight instead of surrender. That takes something most people don't have. Tom looked at Leanne. Both of you. They buried the bodies that afternoon in a shallow trench they managed to hack out of the frozen earth near the property line. Tom read a brief prayer over them, more for the living than the dead. When they were covered and marked with simple stones, he turned to Caleb. My report will state that you acted in lawful defense of life and property. These men came here with intent to commit kidnapping and murder. They got what they deserved. If anyone from San Francisco wants to argue otherwise, they can take it up with the territorial marshal, but I doubt they will. Why's that? Because Chen Wei wasn't as connected as he claimed. I did some asking around before we rode out here. Man was a mid-level enforcer at best, working independent contracts. His death won't ripple much beyond the people who hired him, and they'll be more interested in protecting themselves than avenging a hired gun who failed his job. Relief washed through Caleb so intense it made him dizzy. So it's over? Really over? Can't promise there won't be questions down the line. But the immediate threat? Yeah, I'd say it's over. Tom clapped him on the good shoulder. You two take care of each other, and Mrs. Hart, welcome to the territory. Sorry your introduction to it was so violent. Violence, I know, Leanne said quietly. Peace is what I am still learning. After Tom and his deputy left, Caleb and Leanne stood together in the fading light, looking at their ranch. The burned barn was a black scar against the snow. The cabin showed signs of battle, bullet holes, splintered shutters, scorch marks where rounds had struck near the windows. It would take months to repair, longer to truly heal. But it was theirs. Hard-won and blood-bought, but theirs. We should go inside, Caleb said. Getting cold. Wait. Leanne caught his hand. I want to remember this moment. Standing here, knowing we are safe, knowing we are free, knowing we have future instead of just survival. Caleb pulled her close, wrapping his good arm around her. We'll have a lot of moments like this. Years of them. You promise? I promise. They went inside together, and Caleb built up the fire while Leanne prepared a simple supper. They ate in comfortable silence, the crackling flames and the occasional pop of settling timbers the only sounds. When they finished, Leanne cleared the dishes and then turned to Caleb with an expression he couldn't quite read. What is it? He asked. I want to tell you something. About my life in China, before San Francisco. You don't have to. I want to. You should know who you married. All of it, not just the parts I choose to show. Caleb nodded and waited, giving her space to speak at her own pace. My family was poor, she began, settling into the chair across from him. Farmers in small village near Canton. We had almost nothing, but we had each other. My father was kind man, Weak, but kind. My mother was strong, had to be, to keep us alive. She stared into the fire, her eyes distant. When I was 14, drought came. Crops failed. Father owed money to landlord, money we could not pay. Landlord say he will take our land, throw family out. Father was desperate. Then man came to village, recruiter. He say he take young girls to America, give them good jobs, good wages. Say families will receive money every month. Say girls will have better life. But it was a lie. Yes. But we did not know this. Father thought he was saving family, thought he was giving me opportunity. Her voice remained steady, but Caleb saw her hands clench in her lap. I was so scared when I left, but I believed the promises, believed I would work as maid, send money home, maybe even bring family to America someday. When did you realize the truth? On the ship. Took 3 months to cross ocean. By the time we reached San Francisco, I knew exactly what I was, what I had been sold to become. She drew a shaky breath. They took us to house. Big house, fancy house. Told us we owed money for passage, for room, for food. Said we would work off debt. But debt never got smaller, always grew, and the work, you don't have to describe it. I want you to understand. For 5 years, I was not person. I was thing, object, used and discarded and used again. Some men were kind in their way. Most were not. Chenwei was worst. He enjoyed causing pain, enjoyed reminding us we were nothing. Lian, I tried to escape 3 times. First time, they caught me at the docks. Chenwei beat me until I could not walk for a week. Second time, I made it 2 blocks. They brought me back and chained me in basement for a month. Third time, she touched the scar on her ribs. This was third time. Chenwei cut me. Said next time he would kill me, slowly, as example to other girls. But you tried again anyway. Yes. Because staying was dying. Running was chance to live. And when Bayer came, when I heard what he did to girls, how they suffered before they died, I knew this was last chance. So when storm came and rope was loose, I ran, and I kept running until I fell in snow outside your barn. She finally looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. This is who I am, Caleb. I am survivor of things no one should survive. I am damaged and scarred, and some days I am so full of anger I do not know what to do with it. I am not gentle wife who will make you comfortable home. I am woman who has seen darkness and still carries it inside. Caleb stood and moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking both her hands in his. You think I don't have darkness. I killed men at Shiloh who were younger than me, boys who should have been home helping with harvest instead of dying in mud. I watched my wife burn with fever and couldn't save her. I spent 3 years alone in this cabin, wishing I'd died with her. We're both carrying darkness, Leon, but maybe, he squeezed her hands, maybe together we can carry it better. Maybe we can help each other find some light. You really believe that? I have to believe it. Otherwise, what was the point of any of this? What was the point of surviving if we're just going to let the darkness win? Leon leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. I want to believe it too. Want to believe we can heal, can be happy, can build something good from all this pain. Then we will. One day at a time, one choice at a time, together. They stayed like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other's presence. Then Leon pulled back, wiping her eyes, and managed a small smile. You are a good man, Caleb Hart. Too good for broken woman like me. You're not broken. You're surviving. There's a difference. Maybe. She stood and offered him her hand. Help me understand this difference. Teach me how to live instead of just survive. If you teach me the same thing. Deal. They spent the evening making plans for spring, what repairs to prioritize, what crops to plant, how to rebuild the barn stronger than before. Leon asked questions about ranching, about the land, about the rhythms of Montana seasons. Caleb found himself talking more than he had in years, sharing knowledge he'd thought would die with him. When they finally went to bed, there was an easiness between them that had been building since that first morning when Leanne had woken in his cabin and chosen to stay. They lay together in the darkness, and Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in 3 long years. Hope. The winter passed slowly, but not unbearably. Caleb's shoulder healed, though it would ache in cold weather for the rest of his life. Leon learned the work of the ranch with fierce determination, mastering tasks that would have defeated less stubborn people. She learned to milk the cows, to mend fences, to read the weather and predict storms. She learned to cook American food, though she occasionally surprised Caleb with dishes from her homeland made with whatever ingredients they had available. In February, a letter came from San Francisco. Caleb opened it with hands that shook, fearing legal trouble, fearing men coming to finish what Chenwei had started. Instead, he found a brief note from a lawyer stating that Chenwei's organization had been dissolved, his assets seized by authorities, and all contracts associated with him declared void. The women he'd held were being processed through immigration channels and given opportunity to apply for legal residency. Leon read the letter 3 times, as if unable to believe it was real. "It is truly over," she whispered. "I am truly free. You've been free since you chose to stay here. But yes, now it's official, legal. No one can ever claim you again." She folded the letter carefully and placed it in the box where they kept important documents. Then she turned to Caleb with determination in her eyes. "I want to learn to read and write. Real education, not just basic words. I want to be able to handle ranch business, write letters, keep books. Will you teach me?" "I'll teach you everything I know." And he did. Through the long winter evenings, they sat by the fire with books Margaret had left behind, primers and novels and agricultural journals. Leon absorbed knowledge like parched earth absorbing rain, her quick mind grasping concepts that Caleb struggled to explain. Within a month, she was reading simple texts on her own. Within 2, she was keeping the ranch accounts with neat precision. Spring came late to Montana that year, but when it arrived, it brought transformation. The snow melted, revealing brown earth that would soon turn green. The neighbors came, as Judge Morrison had promised, bringing lumber and tools and willing hands. Together they raised a new barn, larger than the old one, built to last generations. "This is how we do things out here," one of the ranchers told Leon as they worked. "Man defends his home and his wife against criminals. We stand with him. Don't matter what color his wife's skin is or where she came from. What matters is character, and you two showed plenty of that." Not everyone in Silver Creek was so accepting. There were whispers, sidelong glances, a few outright insults that Caleb had to resist the urge to answer with his fists. But slowly, as people saw Leanne working the ranch, saw her determination and dignity, saw the partnership she and Caleb had built, the hostility faded to grudging respect and eventually to acceptance. By summer, Leanne was pregnant. She told Caleb on a warm June evening, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, her eyes bright with hope and fear. "I know it is soon," she said. "I know we are still learning each other, still building our life. But I want this child. Want to give it everything I never had. Safety, choice, love without conditions." Caleb felt terror and joy war in his chest, memories of Margaret and tiny Thomas threatening to overwhelm him. But Leon wasn't Margaret, and this baby wouldn't be Thomas. This was a new start, a new chance. "We'll do it right this time, he said, pulling her close. "We'll get the best midwife, make sure you have everything you need, and this time," his voice caught, "this time I won't lose anyone. I won't let that happen. You cannot control everything." "Maybe not, but I can try." The baby came in February, in the middle of a snowstorm that reminded Caleb of the night he'd found Leanne. But this time, there was a skilled midwife present, and Dr. Williams was waiting in the guest room in case complications arose. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Caleb's fear threatened to choke him. But when he finally heard the baby's first cry, strong and indignant and alive, something broken inside him began to mend. The midwife placed a squirming, red-faced infant in Leon's arms. "You have a daughter, Mrs. Hart. A healthy, beautiful daughter." Leon looked down at the baby with an expression of such fierce love it made Caleb's throat tight. "She is perfect. She is everything." "What do we name her?" Caleb asked, stroking the baby's downy black hair. "Margaret," Leon said without hesitation. "For the woman who came before me. For the love you carry. But her middle name should be Chinese, should honor where I come from. Margaret May Hart. May means beautiful, means precious." "Margaret May Hart," Caleb repeated, testing the name. "It's perfect. She's perfect." He leaned down to kiss his wife, then his daughter, and felt the last of the darkness that had haunted him for 3 years finally begin to lift. The years that followed were not easy. Ranching never was. There were droughts and blizzards, sick cattle and broken equipment, financial struggles and physical exhaustion. But through it all, Caleb and Leon worked side by side, building something that lasted. Margaret grew into a fierce, bright child who could ride a horse before she could walk properly, and who learned to speak both English and Chinese with equal fluency. 2 years after Margaret came a son, they named Thomas Jian, honoring both the baby Caleb had lost and Leon's Chinese heritage. Then another daughter, another son, until the cabin that had once echoed with loneliness rang with the sounds of children and life. The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Leon proved to have a head for business that complemented Caleb's knowledge of the land. They expanded their holdings, built a proper house to replace the cabin, became pillars of the Silver Creek community despite the initial prejudice. On their 10th anniversary, Caleb took Leon to the spot where he'd found her that snowy night. The barn had long since been rebuilt. The scars of battle had faded. But the memory remained, of a woman collapsed in the snow and a man who'd chosen to save her instead of looking away. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "The choice you made that night to stay? The life we've built here?" Leon looked out across the land they'd worked together, at the house where their children slept, at the future they'd fought so hard to claim. "Regret? No, never. That night I was running from death. But I ran toward life, toward you, toward everything we have now." She took his hand, her grip strong and sure. "You gave me choice when I had none, gave me dignity when I had lost it, gave me love when I thought I was unworthy of it. How could I regret that? I didn't give you anything. You took it, you fought for it. We fought for it, together. That is what makes it precious." She smiled. "You said once that broken things can heal together. You were right. We are proof." Caleb pulled her close, feeling the solid warmth of her against him, and thought about the journey they'd taken from that violent Christmas Eve to this moment of peace. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been simple. But it had been worth it. Every moment had been worth it. "I love you, Leon Hart," he said. "From the moment I found you in the snow to this moment right now to whatever comes after. I love you. And I love you, stubborn man, my partner, my husband, my home." They stood together as the sun set over Montana, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, and watched their children play in the yard of the house they'd built. Behind them, the land stretched vast and beautiful, full of promise and possibility. The storm that had brought Leon to Caleb's door was long past, but the life it had sparked, the love, the partnership, the family they'd created from violence and desperation that would endure, that would last. And in the end, that was all anyone could hope for. To survive the storms, to find someone worth surviving for, to build something good from the ashes of what came before. They had done that, together, and they would keep doing it, one day at a time, for all the days that remained.